On this episode, we ask the questions, can you keep your values and still succeed? Because if it's not legal, it's got to be okay.
Wait, is it?
Take It Offline starts right now.
The fundamentals of business. Mental is a part of the word.
I never ask my clients to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few.
There's money in the banana stand.
I'm a hard-working man.
If you can't learn how to close, you better start thinking about another career.
Put that coffee down.
Welcome, everyone, to the Take It Offline podcast. That's Mike, and I'm Nate.
And we're talking work, life, leadership, and everything in between.
And hopefully, it's what a lot of us are talking about anyway. We just decided to venture down to our local community library and put it in a podcast.
Yeah, and Nate and I are going to put our 50 years of leadership, work, and life experience between the two of us. We're taking all of that and sharing it with all of you. And so while we may not have all the answers, we both have a lot to say.
We do. Our planning meeting was about 4 times as long as this podcast is going to be last night.
I feel like that's a normal kind of planning session.
Yes.
I feel like you've gotten calls from your boss like, dude, lunch is over, come back.
There actually, that was one time. That was, it ties into our conversation on values a little bit. I don't think we're going to get to it, but the door. Remember, that was when the door.
Oh, yeah, the door that.
At the restaurant just kept flying open.
Yeah, and some closed and some didn't.
We'll have to talk about that. But
we can slip that in probably.
You think so?
No, we'll give it a shot.
We'll see where it goes. But yeah, last night we were at one of our favorite local spots. And as we're recording this, the Olympics are wrapping up. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy watching the Olympics. I enjoy sport and competition.
What's your favorite?
I prefer the summer, honestly.
Okay. But in this season, the winter stuff, do you have a favorite event that you like?
Yeah, I really like short track speed skating. I think it's just wild and chaotic, and it's just absolutely nutty. I mean, it's pretty cool.
You know, I was watching that with my cousins not too long ago, and it is pretty cool. And I mean, those blades are enormous. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, if you fall down, I feel like my legs would flare out and cut somebody. Like, I'm pretty sure I would hurt myself.
So, believe it or not, last night I was watching the women's 1,500-meter short track final, and not only did someone fall down and their blades went flying up, but it cut someone. It cut them on their cheek, and they were bleeding all over the ice. They had to stop the race. It was a catastrophe.
Can't be easy to clean blood out of ice. No. All right.
Anyway.
Yes. So Olympics. You've got a cool story for us.
Well, yeah. So we were having our meeting at our local place, and there was some ski jumping on in the background. And I asked you if you had heard of this scandal known as Penis Gate. Oh, man, my sound effects were turned down. We'll edit this out in post. No, we won't. Let me try this again. It's a scandal in the Olympics rocking the 2026 Olympics from Milan known as Penis Gate.
Which I had never heard of.
No, you had not.
And you educated me on Penisgate, but since everyone else wasn't at our dinner last night, why don't you tell everybody what Penisgate is?
That's right. You were missing out. So, in ski jumping, as you're flying through the air, you glide. So your equipment is part of what makes you turn into a flying squirrel briefly. So the size of your skis, the size of your gloves, the size of your suit helps to catch more air and allow you to float through the air farther and earn more distance and gain more points. And what some of the male competitors were doing is they were injecting down there with
not the Australia down there.
No, their penile region, the hyaluronic acid injections down there to enlarge their genitals.
Right, but I think it's interesting. They weren't enlarging them for the jump, right?
No, they were enlarging them for other purposes. But
well, yeah. That's a whole nother article. All right, so they're doing this thing, but how does it benefit them?
Because when they get measured for their suit, they're only allowed to have 4 centimeters of surface area of the suit that's larger than their bodies. So it has to fit them precisely, head to toe, with an exact measurement of extra material. So, yes.
No.
You have a question?
I'm following you. Yeah. So the idea here is swell up.
Yes.
Get a bigger suit.
Yes.
And then the swelling goes away.
Yes. And you are left with sometimes several extra centimeters of extra material. And Mike, I know that this is an audio medium, but look, I made an infographic. I didn't really make it. I found it on Instagram. But Mike is looking at a picture right now of a ski jumper with his crotchal region highlighted, showing...
It actually kind of helps.
It does. That for every 2 centimeters of increased suit circumference, that is equivalent to 5% more lift, which can mean an extra 5.8 meters of jump distance.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so that's more than a car, as you can see there for
Yeah.
reference. And Mike,
He has a picture of an SUV on this paper, guys. Just so you know.
And
with the skier. Over
with the
top of
skier
it.
jumping over the
This is a pretty good graphic. This might be better than the graphic for our podcast. All right.
So here's what's cool, though, is that ski jumping isn't only about distance. You also get judged on form and timing, and there's a whole bunch of other...
Sure, like figure skating is.
Yeah, and
a
there's
lot of components.
You get points added or taken away based on the wind and everything to try to make sure that everyone has a level playing field. But the difference between the silver medalist and the gold medalist in the men's big hill ski jump was only 3.5 meters.
Okay, so this could actually be the difference between winning or losing.
Yes.
Now, is there any idea how many? Is this something just every? Because you remember the steroid scandal back in the day, right? You know, baseball and all that.
Yes.
And at that time, it was like, well, gosh, everybody did it, right? I mean, it was basically, it wasn't an advantage anymore because pretty much everyone had the advantage.
Right.
Is this similar where everyone is doing this, so maybe it's not really an advantage? Or do you think there's some folks out there that have said, no, I don't think that's right, I'm not doing it?
So that's a good question. Right now, it's all alleged. Apparently, it was hearsay that some competitors, they were trying to get the edge over their opponents by saying, hey, I heard that their team doctor has been performing this procedure on them so that they can have larger suits and so they can go farther. And so then the organization that oversees, it's the International Ski Jumping, was ISJ or something, International Ski Jumping Association. They did some investigation and found that the claims weren't founded. The doctor that was accused of it denied it. So nothing was done. It kind of just went away, so to speak.
But it's legal. Is it legal to do this?
So here's what's interesting. The substance that they were injected with is not an illegal performance-enhancing substance.
Okay, so technically it's okay to do.
Correct.
But is it right?
And that brings us to our topic today, all on values. Because when Mike and I first sat down to start looking at this podcast, we were just throwing out questions that we wanted to bring up and talk about as we were, thinking of interesting things that we've experienced in our lives and in our work experience that would benefit others listening and benefit us to dive deeper and talk about. And one of the questions that you asked was, can I get ahead while still playing by the rules?
Yeah, and even more than playing by your rules, sticking to your values, the
Yes.
things that you say you value,
Precisely.
like the way you treat others. You see somebody in work who seems to be doing really well, and it's like, well, okay, but they took credit for someone else's work, or they maybe don't treat people very nicely, or they take shortcuts, or whatever else it might be. Yeah. So that really kind of inspired this topic. But before we go much further,
Yes.
why don't we tell people what we're not talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Because this is a huge topic.
Yes, we could go 1,000 directions with this.
And that's from our test audience so far. That's one of the constructive pieces of feedback we've received, which is we're choosing some really big topics. And so to be able to really dive deep into specific areas would benefit us, this podcast, and ultimately you, my dear listener.
Yeah, let's hope so. So here's what we're not talking about, folks. We're not going to dive into how do you develop your values, how do you evaluate your values, what's a good value, what's not a good value. We're not going to go down that road.
How to work if your corporation's values are if they need to be redeveloped or
Which is a great topic, but I mean, gosh, there's so many ways. We're not going down that road. So Nate has done some research that is a really kind of cool conversation that we're going to dive into. And I've not looked at most of this, so I only have a very high level idea of where he's going, and so. You're going to get some really genuine reactions.
That's the idea.
We'll see how much has to get bleeped or cut. but yeah, we're going to have some fun, which is exactly kind of what we do at dinner, right? We kind of throw an idea at each other. We discuss it back and forth, and then try to see if we can't challenge each other's thought processes and maybe bring some new things to the table that don't have to do with penis injections.
Yes.
And that's not a normal conversation. We just need to put that out there.
Well, it is for us.
Only because of the Olympics.
Yes, that's true.
I mean, whatever you're doing in your free time, Nate, I don't need to know about it.
We're gonna move along. So here's as I was preparing for this episode, I was really trying to differentiate between different ways that people make decisions. That individuals make decisions, that corporations make decisions. And in my observation, I found that it's very difficult to measure value-based decision-making. And it's one of the things that we dove into last night, Mike, when we were talking, is I would ask, well, why is it that this person would make this decision? Why is it that this corporation would make this decision? Because it seems like the logical answer would be something else. And there's no real easy answer because it's hard to measure value-based decision-making. So
can you give us an example?
I will. So let's take a look at the alternative first.
Okay.
Let's take a look at data-driven decision-making. So DDDM, data-driven decision-making, is actually a thing. Studies have shown that it is data-driven decision models are 6 times more likely to be profitable, 6 times more likely to retain customers, 23 times more likely to acquire customers, provide a 5 to 10% increase in profit, as well as faster revenue growth and 8% higher earnings. So right off the jump, data-driven decision-making sounds extremely profitable.
Well, yeah, and Nate, I can tell you that I've seen this. I've seen in all the companies that I've worked for, there's always reporting. There's trends, there's benchmarking, there's all of that. And you collect it, you analyze it, and you leverage it to make a decision. And I mean, gosh, I feel like the entire business world is built on exactly that. So, but I feel like you're setting me up here because you're giving me all these wonderful numbers.
Yep.
You've already said that value-based decision-making is harder. So if data decision-making makes sense, it's used, it's working, what's the other side of this coin?
Well, so let's turn the page here. In value-driven decision-making, over the long term, it shows 36% higher earnings. So data-driven decision-making is easy to measure. In the short term, you're looking at 8% higher earnings. Over the long term, a longer period of time, 3 to 5 years, you're going to end up seeing 36% cumulative earnings over that time. However, at first, it's not going to show up that same way as the data-driven decision-making. The values-based decision-making is a much slower on-ramp to that 36%. Value-driven decision-making, 47% higher total revenues over a 15-year period. So when we were looking at 8% higher earnings in data-driven, 8% higher earnings, 10% increase in profit, but value-based decision over a 15-year period, 47% increase in revenue.
Hold on. 47% increase with value data decision-making over what time period?
Over 15 years.
15 years.
15-year period.
And then the 15 years of data-driven is what? Do we know that?
I don't have those numbers. It's just that on average,
We just know that value decision-making won when we look at it over a 15-year period.
Correct. Much higher.
Okay.
Values-driven decision companies typically outperform the S&P 500 by as much as 10x over a decade.
Did it get into, so I want to throw something out there. I promise
Yeah.
not to go down this
No,
rabbit hole too far, but there's a great book called I think it's called Give and Take, and I believe it's Adam Grant. But don't hold me to that. One of the things that he talks about is you see some folks that rise, and in this concept, it's like, well, these people seem to be takers, and they seem to do really well. They shoot up very quickly within a company. But very similar to this data, the people who are givers in their leadership tend to actually rise further in the long term. So I feel like there's a little bit of an overlap here with this idea that if you're giving, that's probably an extension of values.
Yes.
Right. Versus someone who's always just necessarily trying to do what's best for them.
Yes. Which
could be a kind of, okay, I've analyzed the data and this is the best course. This is going to get me the thing that I want to get. So this is where I'm going to go. And so it kind of strikes me as like, wow, that's kind of similar to something that he's talked about and researched on and looked at as well. So I won't go any further on that unless you want to take it somewhere. But my question is, did it get into how? How do you measure the value-based? Data seems pretty easy, right?
Right.
So obviously they did it because they measured it, and you're giving me all these facts that S&P does better. So how do you measure value-based decision-making?
So that's really hard to do, and so most people don't do it, and so most people don't measure it, and they don't choose to follow a value-based decision path. At least most organizations. I won't say most people. Most organizations stick with the data-driven because the data-driven it sort of removes the emotion from things. It's just numbers on a page. Like here's this position, here are your goals across the nation that you need to hit in this position, as opposed to values-based might break down those goals into sectors based on population density or affluency in different regions of company. And that becomes harder to measure and harder to do than just looking at the data and saying X plus Y equals Z.
Yeah, so I can see that. But even there, though, what the example you gave, I guess I'm struggling with it just a little bit because so I get the idea. I've looked at the numbers. We want everyone, we're an East Coast based company. We want everybody to be able to hit, 10% of whatever, 10% growth this year. And then what you're saying is, okay, but a value base might look more like, well, we want the Northeast to be at 15. We want the Southeast to be at 10. We want Mid-Atlantic to be at 8 because we've looked at geographies or densities or opportunities and we've adjusted it accordingly. Correct. But isn't that still data-driven? Isn't that still saying like, hey, we've looked at data just at a smaller level and then made a decision based on it rather than a peanut butter spread and just be like, hey, you know what? It's just easier to tell everyone 10%. That doesn't take as much work. But aren't they both kind of data-driven?
They are, absolutely.
So where's the value piece in the second scenario of a more personalized piece? Where's the value piece fit into that?
Well, let me turn the question back on you a little bit, Mike, and that can take us into the piece of the conversation on making decisions based on data versus values. Because yes, you're absolutely right. Those both have elements of data-driven decision-making in them, where it's here's a number, here's the increase we want to see, and here's where we're going to go. And you can massage the numbers however you want, but in the end, it's still data-driven. Values-based is a much more long-term, a much longer runway, a larger time horizon, and tends to be much more intrinsically focused than extrinsically focused. So data looks at the data out there that's coming in. Values driven looks at, okay, here's who we are as a company. Here's who I am as an employee. And here's what I'm going to try to accomplish for the greater good of the company and the people that I serve. And so that was not I will acknowledge it was not a good example.
No. But I think there's a piece in there, actually. As you're describing it, like my head's kind of going through this. And of course, you're like, I'm going to throw the question back to you. So I'm sitting here going, oh, crap, I got to answer. So where my head goes is you dig deeper on the data because you want to make sure that you are being fair to individuals based upon the circumstances that they're living in. So rather than just say, hey, it'd be great for our company to hit 10%, so just give everyone 10%, and yay, there'll be some winners, there'll be some losers, whatever, we're going to hit our 10%, we're going to be fine. Versus you're saying, no, let's go a little deeper here, because I really want to make sure that we are giving people the best opportunity to win, because we value fairness and we value people having the opportunity to have success, not just our company having success. So
Precisely.
I think it is actually. So it is, and again,
If they
both have data,
correct.
So it's not that data should be thrown out.
Yes,
It's how you apply the data.
correct. Because
Good distinction.
It shifts the focus, and that's why also values-driven decision-making leads to a 40% higher employee engagement levels and a higher retention rate and recruitment rate across the companies that were studied. I was fascinated by the numbers because at first, when I started researching, the only thing that was coming up was database decision-making. In terms of the stats and the research that was done. And I had to get very specific and look for very specific articles to drill down on the values-based side, because not as many people measure it. Not as many people, and we've discussed this, looking at decision-making in business, whether large or small businesses, and questioning, well, why would they do it this way? And more often than not, the answer is, well, because we've always done it that way, or because that's what the data tells us, or because
it works,
or it works, or it seems to work.
Well, what you even said, it does work.
Yes, that's true.
It just, there is a better way,
Yes,
right? There's a way that works even better. But it's probably uncomfortable, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about most people that are leading organizations,
yeah,
small, medium, large, whatever, there's probably type A people who like control.
okay,
And value-based decisions don't have a lot of control.
a lot of influence, but not a lot of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And look, I've been in a position where I have had direct control of as many as 40, 50 people at a time. And I've had positions where I have influence of 1,000 people. And gosh, there's a difference. And there's a frustration inside on the influence side, because you feel like, gosh, if I just had, the authority, I could move this thing forward. So absolutely, there's a difference there. So I'm thinking you got these type A individuals who like control, and what you're telling me is data gives me control, but I'm not going to use that completely. I'm going to try to put this other element in there that I have less control over, that I've got to try to maybe use a little more influence and judgment and things like that. And you're telling me it's going to take a little bit longer to see the results of this thing, which doesn't always land well with your board, your shareholders, your equity owners, whoever it is that you might have. So I think that probably lends itself to why are folks not jumping on that bandwagon when you've got statistics that tell you that piece of it.
Right.
I have one company that I can think of off the top of my head, and I thought this was really cool. And I don't necessarily think every company has to do this. I don't think this gets really done today at all, right? And you're going to see where it's going.
Lay it on me.
Volvo.
Yes.
Can't tell you the year. Volvo invented seatbelts, right? I didn't know that, but that was pretty cool. So they invented seatbelts, but one of their values was it was very much about safety, right? And that was a big part of we talked about this previously, their vision or their mission was around, their purpose was around, we want to be safe. So they invented this seatbelt. They could have kept it. They had the patent for the whole thing, but they decided to give it away because they cared so much about safety. They realized if we keep this to ourselves, awesome. We're going to do well. We're going to save lives for people that buy Volvos, but everybody that buys all the other cars, there's still going to be deaths. But if we give it away, we save a lot more people. And because we cared about safety and saving lives, they basically gave up their patent for seatbelts, and now every car has a seatbelt because of that. And that's kind of a cool piece of not just, not even just, hey, our purpose is safety, but it's also the standpoint of like, one of our values is to make sure that we can protect people. And we've invented this thing that if we hoard, it doesn't live that value.
Right.
So we're going to give it away, give up a little bit of profit, but we think it's we think there's a to your thing, on the longer side, this is going to be good for us. So that's a story that I think kind of fits that idea of how do you live a value inside of your actual work.
Sure. And in the short term, even in the long term, I don't know that it necessarily increased earnings for the Volvo company. I don't think many people got raises because they gave away their seatbelt technology, but I would have to imagine that the people who were working there at the time, who were part of that decision, that had to feel pretty good that you are influencing car companies around the world in providing a safer option for, because seatbelts used to be optional in cars, a safer option for.
They even used to be optional to wear.
That's true.
But you know what I think it also did? Think about Volvo, right? Okay. I didn't know that story. Even before I had learned that, I knew Volvo to be a company that was about safety.
Oh my! I remember my parents all the time saying Volvos are built like tanks. They're really good in crashes, lots of safety features that other cars don't have. They just had that reputation for it.
Right. And so you hear that story and you're like, well, that makes perfect sense because that's who they are.
Right.
Right.
And that reputation.
Absolutely. And I think that's a piece of the values, right? You hear someone did something, you're like, well, yeah, that's just who they are. That's who Nate is. That's who Mike is. And I think that kind of speaks to the company side of things as well. But I can see where the value-based leadership would be a little bit harder. And I can also see where even 15 years down the road, someone looks at it and goes, well, yeah, that's what the data told us to do, so we did it. And it's like, yeah, but there was another element that was inside of that as well. Right? That led you to say, I'm going to take path B versus path A.
And that's part of where the difficulty comes in, because data, if data is the only thing that's being used to make a decision, that's going to be a short-term decision. When you add value to it, it becomes much more difficult to maintain over the long run. I'm reminded, this is a bit of a dated reference, but Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he has the flywheel, and he talks about like those little pushes of the flywheel, and as you get everybody pushing in the same direction, these little pushes suddenly, over a long period of time, it doesn't happen overnight, but you build up this massive momentum on the flywheel because everyone's pushing in the same direction. And I think for larger organizations to have a shared sense of values, or not sense of values, have shared values in everything from execution to development of goals and forecasting. That's very difficult to have everybody pushing in the same direction.
Yeah, it is. Nate, we were talking about giving away, right?
Yeah. With
the little Volvo story there. So I'm gonna throw something at you that I don't know if I told you I was gonna throw at you.
Okay, I like those.
Do you feel like well, let me start here. Is there a value that you have today that you're like, gosh, I wish I had this when I was, 18, 19, 20 years old? Is there a value that you've developed that you look back and go, gosh, that would have served me so well had I had that?
There is. I think being truly and fully authentic in the way that you communicate and present to others. My mom always used to say that she would always say, your sin will find you out. Like whatever it is that you're hiding is eventually going to come to light. Eventually, light shines in the darkness. And so when you live with a genuine sense of authenticity and there's nothing to hide from, there's a tremendous freedom in that. And that's a value, that authenticity, that I've always kind of known to be true, but until you really experience what that looks like, both for good and bad, that's when you start to realize, oh yeah, this is the way I want to live. This is how I want to be known at work. And even someone mentioned it the other day. We were in a meeting and someone said, oh, well, Nate would never do that. He's too kind. He's too genuine. And I was just like, wow, I haven't done anything special to make them think that I'm kind or genuine. I'm just living in a way and going about my daily work in such a way that that's what they see. They see that authenticity. It meant a whole lot to me. I don't think they even know that it mattered to me, but it was a really cool moment. I was like, oh, okay, so that's how they see me. That's good. That's how I want to be seen. That's the reputation that I want to have. That's the way, that's the value that I want to present.
Yeah. I had an experience like that. One of my stepdaughters one time, and she didn't tell it to me directly, but she said it to my wife. She made a comment about, well, Mike is just dependable, and that, same thing, right? Like and this kind of opens up the other side, other pieces of questions that we want to throw at each other here. Is I don't think I would have put dependable on my list if I was making a list of values.
Yeah,
which. At that time I hadn't, but if I was making a list of values, or if someone said, well, Mike, what are some of your values, right? I'd list, I think everyone lists some of the very generic ones. Well, family is a value and responsibility.
Well, is it though? Is family a value? I think you can value family, but is that really a value?
I think it is. Yeah, I really do. I think valuing family is, because I
think family is valuable. So I'm just pushing back a little bit at the use of the term is I value my family, but is that a value? I guess you're a family guy. That could be.
No, but if you value your family, right? So let's think about when you value something, you choose that thing over other things.
Okay, yeah.
You make time for that thing over other things, right? So if I value, meditation or personal space or nature, then I go spend time in nature. I go spend time meditating. So if I value family, then I spend time with family. I do things for family. I put them before other things. And so yeah, I think family can be a value. And I also think about the idea that when you're younger, when you're 20 something, family's probably not a big value, right? You're off living life and having fun. You probably put friends as a value,
sure.
right? Adventure as a value, right? Or exploring, whatever, learning. But you get a little bit older, you get married, you have kids, you have grandkids, you get to some of those things. And I think, well, all of a sudden, and I think this is for me, one of those things where I'm like, family was always a pretty big value, right? I grew up with a father that had 8 siblings, 8 children altogether, so 7 siblings. And our family get-togethers were 40, 50 people.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds pretty chaotic.
Yeah, my grandmother sent me around to count people, and there weren't seats, right? This was an old house that was, my grandfather built this house, or extended onto the house, by bringing home scrap pieces of lumber from the lumber yard that he worked at.
Really?
And built the rest of the house.
That's so cool.
It really was, right? And so, very old house. There was no room to sit. And
sure.
And if you got up, it was gone. Yeah. And if you were young and an uncle wanted the seat, you moved.
Time to go.
So most of the time we're all sitting on the floor, right? Sitting in front of folks. But so I grew up with family mattered, because that's where I spent every holiday, and I loved it, right? And so it was a little bit different. And so very early age, I was a little bit of an oddball thinking about kids and family and all that. But I don't think the average person, they'll be like, oh, family's important. But there's a difference between important and value. And I think...
What's the difference? Can you dig into that a little bit more?
Well, I think there's things that you feel like are important,
okay.
But they aren't necessarily things that you value. So I'd have to think on a good example.
Sort of like our mission and vision, how there's... I sense that there's a distinct difference between the two.
Yeah.
When we were referring now to last week's podcast, but you don't as much.
Right.
And so, to me, it's and I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, I got an example for you though.
Okay.
So I'm glad you talked for a minute.
So to me, it's values are kind of at the top of the list. There are a lot of things that are important, but the values kind of like then help everything else fall into place. An example is, not really a specific example, but the word priority. Only until recently did that word become plural to say, what are your priorities? Because technically you can't have more than one priority. Like, you have a priority.
Kind of like the whole best friend thing.
Exactly. And so I think the values fall into a similar category where, like, you can value, really value, like, say, I don't know, pick a number, 3 things, 5 things, I don't know. I'm sure it's different for everybody, but whatever those values, that drives the other things underneath that are important.
We might have to come back to the priority one.
Okay.
I have to think on that one. Don't know if I'm on the same page.
Ooh, we'll put that into next future podcast.
We'll make a note of that one. Let's see if we bring it back. Here's the important.
Okay.
My car is important.
Yes.
I don't value my car.
Okay.
My clothes are important.
So taking
I don't
care
value
of your car is important. buying good clothes that last long and look good and fit you well is important, but you don't value that.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I would say there are things that are important, but they may not be valuable.
Okay.
I think valuable are the things that where you would have a very hard time compromising on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it starts to distinguish that value piece, right? So, and again, I think about a young person who's like, well, look, I'm not going to go home and see my family for Easter. I'm going to go, take spring break and travel with my friends.
Okay.
So what are you? So you're choosing what you value.
Sure.
You value relaxation and fun and exploration, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think in life, values can grow and change and all that. Again, we're not getting into good and bad values, but that's to me an example of where someone in that position, well, yeah, I love my family. My family's important to me, but values are the things that you put ahead of the other things. It kind of like in your data. Data is important.
Yes.
But I use the data to help make decisions on the things that I value.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll write that down.
It's a good thing we recorded it. I probably couldn't say it again.
I know we said we weren't going to get into the differentiating between good, quote unquote, good or bad values. But one of the things that we were kicking around a little bit is experiences where we either had to compromise our values, were told to compromise our values, or chose to compromise our values, or all three, in order to find success. Do you have examples of that in your experience?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I probably have of one of each. Here's where I'm going to start. I think I realized over time there's values that I inherited that probably weren't the best values. So self-reliance was a value that I inherited.
Okay.
So I saw my father, unbelievably talented guy. And he's a blue-collar guy, but he could do anything. My uncles would talk about the fact that, like, your dad just knew how to do anything. Didn't matter what it was. That's intimidating. And but growing up, we didn't hire anyone for anything. Like, no, right? We fixed it.
Yeah.
The roof, the car, the chimney.
Yeah.
You need to cut down a tree and chop it up.
Yeah.
You do it, right?
Your dad, when we were changing the spark plugs in my truck, and I broke one of the drill bits off and he's like, "Yep, I got a tool just for that," and he came over and helped us fix it. I was blown away.
Yeah. The nut that held the coil down, you broke. It snapped. Yeah, and of course you've never met a man with more tools. That's my future inheritance. So but I learned how to do a lot of that stuff, which I'm so thankful for. But what it didn't teach me was, and this has led to some procrastination in my life, which was if I didn't know how to do it, I didn't feel like I could go ask for help or hire someone to do it because I had this value like, no, you're supposed to do it. And so we sometimes inherit those values that and I still would say that I value a level of self-reliance, but it's also okay to ask for help.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I had a coworker, a manager actually. I was making a career change and learning some new systems in a new industry, and she impressed upon me the value of asking for help. And one of the things she told me, I was stressed out in this particularly busy time. It was a difficult client that we were working with. And she said, I'll never forget, she said, "Nate, no one's going to die. Just relax. You can make a mistake. We can fix any mistake. And no one's going to die." And it was so freeing to have permission to make mistakes and to fail, knowing that they could be fixed and then learn from them and not make them a second time. And that little moment of leadership where she just gave me the value, gave me the permission to have the value of asking for help and making a mistake was incredibly freeing. It is a key moment for me in my journey of really leaning into that authentic self, that authenticity that I try to live in.
Yeah, I can see that, Nate. I almost would think that it leads to a value of curiosity, right? If you're someone who wants to be curious and wants to explore, which I know you are, and want to learn new things, if you feel like I can't make a mistake, I don't have the room for that, it kind of crushes that ability to do that.
Most
so
definitely.
she opened the door for you to be able to to do those things. So,
Yeah.
so let's bring it back for our audience a little bit on
Okay.
where we started this thing, because I think we've covered a good portion of it.
Yes.
But we started with this whole idea of, well, it's legal, so it must be okay. It's not against the rules, so I can do it.
Kind of a gray area.
Yeah, and then the idea of, well, how do you hang on to things that you value, that you know this is what I think should happen. This is right. This is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How do I hang on to that? And can I succeed? Is it possible to succeed? So have you ever been in a position where you felt like, wow, like this is hard. Like I've got this value, but man, it's being challenged if I want to be successful.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And I'll first say this too. When we were having our planning meeting for this portion of the episode, you said if you're willing to play the long game, your values will serve you. I don't know if you wrote that down, but I wrote that down. Those were your words. They're coming out of my mouth right now, though. So
I like it. Sounds good.
if you're willing to play the long game, your values will serve you, which ties into the data from the very beginning between data-based decision-making and value-based decision-making, because years ago, I was in car sales. I was working for a very large national company, very reputable, and in fact, one of their values as a company was integrity. And it was the number one value, is that we want to treat people the way that we would want to be treated when we're buying a car. And it was a really fun job. I had a ton of fun selling cars. Where there was a little bit of friction with the values was that there were oftentimes people who would come in to buy a car who were in a rough financial spot. And I've been in rough financial spots myself, so I get it. But, rough credit, maybe some negative equity in the car. And there were people that were buying cars at, folks, 16, 18, 19% on cars. In certain states, they cap it at like the low 20s. And I was selling cars, and there was negative equity going into these deals sometimes. And it was really, I was wrestling with that. And our manager one time, and he's a good guy, he said, look, we're not their financial advisors. People need a car. They need a car to go to work. We don't know what situation they're in. And he wasn't pressuring us necessarily to make sales that were unethical. And Mike, as you know, there are a whole lot of laws around when someone wants to make a purchase or submit an application. We're not supposed to deny that. We're supposed to allow that to come through. But I remember I had a couple come in. They were upside down on their current vehicle and trying to trade it in for something different. I'm talking upside down $18,000. Like they owed $20,000 and we were going to give them $2,000 for their car. And so they had $18,000 that they were trying to put into their new vehicle, and they were going to end up with something worse than what they drove in on. And we were looking at the thing and crunching the numbers, and I said, guys, listen, do you need a new car? Is there anything wrong with this car? And they're like, no, we just want more space. And I said, look, if you just tackle this car payment for the next 6 to 8 months, because their income was pretty strong. Like if you just tackle this car payment for the next 6 to 8 months, pay down even half of what you owe, come back, you'll be in a much better position in order to make this deal. And they were really appreciative, and they left. And then I remember my manager came up and he asked, he goes, oh, it didn't work? And I said, nah, they had a lot of negative equity. It just wasn't going to be a good fit. And actually, one of the banks did approve them at a very high interest rate with a very high down payment. And they were kind of hemming and hawing. And I said, wait, you have that down payment? And they said, yeah. I said, guys, put that on the car that you have and pay it down and then come back and see me in 8 months. Well, they did. They ended up coming back and seeing me in 8 months. They got a better deal, and they ended up referring their son came and bought a car from me another 6 months after that, because they saw me as someone who was handling the deal with integrity. I was still following the rules and expectations of my position and my employer, but I was able to hold true to the value that I had, that I wasn't going to, put someone in a hole and then hand them a shovel. So
Right. Yeah. I think that's it's a good example of everything that we've been talking about, where it's, I can do the deal. I'm supposed to do the deal, but my value says this isn't the best position, and I want to put people in the best position. And so you gave them good advice, and it ended up turning into 2 sales later down the road. And the client's in a better position.
And that's one of those things that's almost impossible to measure. I'm sure that someone somewhere could and is measuring that, but here in this, for our purposes here, it's purely anecdotal.
Yeah. Well, it's also the idea that it's difficult, it's not that it's difficult to measure. You could look and go, oh, well, Nate didn't have a sale. Now he has 2 sales. But can you tie it back to it was about a value?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's the part that's hard, because that doesn't show up anywhere that says, hey, well, this client was delayed in 8 months to purchase a vehicle because Nate executed this particular value. So it does make it harder.
Yeah.
But I think that there's 3 questions that I want to give our listeners out there that kind of come with all of this and all of the things that we've discussed today. And these are the 3 questions. Number 1, ask yourself, what are your values? Number 2, do you live by them? And number 3, would you compromise them to get ahead?
That is something to consider. Well, that is a good use of our time, Mike.
Yeah, and what we need now, tell your friends if you like the podcast. If you don't like the podcast, then tell your enemies, or just go ahead and just tell everybody. But we want to invite you guys to join into the conversation. So look us up on Instagram, shoot us over an email, join in, tell us what you think, give us your insights, maybe answer the questions that we've left you with today. And until next time, we would ask you to take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
The Take It Offline podcast is a production of Take It Offline Media. All views and opinions are ours alone, reasonably informed and meant for personal enrichment and entertainment. Are you not entertained? Views expressed do not represent any particular organization or employer. Copyright 2026 by Take It Offline Media.